All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to unpack some serious geopolitics?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Today, we're looking at the situation between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's heating up, and we need to break it down, especially for those of you following along with the UPSC exams. This is some high-stakes international drama unfolding right now.
Yeah, and this has some serious implications not just for the region, but globally too.
Right, we've got a whole stack of news here from sources like the Economic Times,
Mm.
and they're all pointing to a powder keg situation developing.
Yeah, this is one of those situations that could really go either way. And for India watching closely, this has huge implications.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Pakistan launched airstrikes in Afghanistan just recently.
In Afghanistan's Paktika province, to be precise.
Right, in Paktika province.
Yeah.
And their justification, they say they were going after the TTP, the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan.
Which they claim have bases in that region.
Right. They're saying that these were targeted strikes against militant groups.
Now, the problem is the death toll is already pretty high. At least 46 people were reported killed.
And that's where this story gets complicated because
Because the Afghan Taliban is saying that there were civilians killed in these strikes.
we're
Including refugees.
from Waziristan.
Exactly. So now you have this question of, were these strikes as surgical and targeted as Pakistan claims, or was there collateral damage?
And the Afghan Taliban is not letting this slide. They're not happy about this at all.
No, they're furious. They've condemned the strikes very publicly and very strongly. They're accusing Pakistan of deliberately trying to undermine trust and create more friction between the two countries.
And they even went so far as to summon the Pakistani chargé d'affaires in Kabul, which is
That's a big diplomatic move.
that's a pretty clear sign that they're not messing around.
Right. It's a way of saying we're taking this very seriously and we're not going to tolerate violations of our sovereignty.
So you've got these two sides, both pointing fingers, a lot of accusations flying around, and then you add in this history of conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's adding fuel to the fire.
Oh, absolutely. This is decades of mistrust, suspicion, and outright conflict bubbling up to the surface.
Okay, but let's bring in another key player in all of this, the TTP. You mentioned them earlier.
The TTP, the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, they're a militant group that operates along the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
And they've been causing a lot of trouble lately.
They have a long history of launching attacks on Pakistani forces, and in recent months, those attacks have been increasing.
So Pakistan is saying, look, the Afghan Taliban is harboring these guys. They're giving them safe haven. They're supporting them.
Which the Afghan Taliban denies, of course. It's a very messy situation with accusations flying back and forth.
And this is where things get really interesting for India, because now India's watching all of this unfold right on its doorstep.
And it's a situation that could have serious consequences for India's security and its interests in the region.
All right, so we've got this volatile situation developing between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And now we need to figure out, okay, what does this mean for India?
Right, because this isn't just some far-off conflict. It has the potential to create ripple effects across the entire region. And India's right in the middle of it all. I mean, a full-blown conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It could be a humanitarian disaster. We could see a huge refugee crisis.
With people fleeing across the borders looking
Yeah,
for safety,
exactly. And that would put a lot of pressure on neighboring countries,
including India,
especially India. India already shares a long border with Pakistan.
a very porous border.
Right, and a surge of refugees would put a strain on resources, and it could create instability.
And that's not even mentioning the security risks.
Oh, yeah. The potential for increased cross-border terrorism is a major concern for India.
Something India's been dealing with for decades.
Right, so India really has a vested interest in seeing a stable and peaceful Afghanistan.
Well, with all this tension that's looking less and less likely.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. And there's another layer to all of this that we need to talk about.
Okay, lay it on me.
India's relationship with the Taliban.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. You've got this conflict brewing between Pakistan and the Taliban, but then at the same time, you're seeing some signs of diplomatic engagement between India and the Taliban.
It's like two parallel tracks running at the same time.
It's like they're trying to play both sides.
In a way, I think India is trying to be very pragmatic about this, despite the concerns they have about the Taliban.
And those concerns are valid.
Yeah.
I mean, the Taliban's ideology, their ties to Pakistan, it all cause for worry.
For sure. But it seems like New Delhi is willing to at least keep the lines of communication open.
And we've seen some concrete steps in that direction, like India allowing a Taliban representative to work out of the Afghan consulate in Mumbai.
That was a pretty big move. A lot of people were surprised by that.
I definitely raised some eyebrows.
Mhm.
But it also shows that India is willing to engage, even if it's cautiously.
Right. And then there was that meeting back in November.
Oh, yeah, between the Taliban's defense minister, Mullah Yaqub, and a senior Indian foreign ministry official.
That meeting happened in Kabul.
Okay, so what happened? Did they find any common ground?
Well, according to reports, Mullah Yaqub gave India some assurances. He said that the Taliban wouldn't allow Afghan territory to be used for activities against India.
Wow, so that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, he basically said that Kabul wants a diplomatic partnership with New Delhi.
So maybe Pakistan's actions are actually pushing Afghanistan closer to India?
That's what some analysts are saying. It's like an unintended consequence.
So we've got this conflict and diplomacy all happening at the same time. And India's stuck in the middle trying to figure out the best way to navigate this whole mess.
It's like walking a tightrope. They want to protect their own interests, but they also want to see stability in the region.
It's a classic security dilemma.
Exactly. One country's actions to improve their own security end up threatening the security of others.
And India is caught between a rock and a hard place with Pakistan on one side and the Taliban on the other.
It's a really tough spot to be in. And for our listeners who are preparing for the UPSC,
Yeah, this is the kind of situation you need to be able to analyze.
you need to understand the history, the players, their motivations, and what the potential outcomes could be.
It's not enough to just memorize facts. You have to be able to think critically about these complex situations.
Exactly. This situation is like a real-world case study.
Okay, so we've talked about the airstrikes, the Taliban's response, the TTP, and the potential impact on India. But let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. What are the long-term implications of this conflict?
Especially for India's strategic calculations and its foreign policy in the years to come.
This is a game changer, isn't it?
Yeah.
This whole situation throws a lot of assumptions out the window.
Definitely. And one of the big questions is how will India respond to this in the long run?
Because traditionally, India has taken a more hands-off approach in the region.
Right, a more non-interventionist approach. But this conflict could push them to be more proactive.
Especially when it comes to their own backyard.
Exactly. Imagine if the instability in Afghanistan spills over into Pakistan.
That would be a nightmare scenario for India.
It would be a direct threat to their security interests, and it could force them to take a much more assertive stance.
And we haven't even touched on the economic side of things.
Right. India's made significant investments in Afghanistan, trying to promote development and connectivity in the region.
Roads, infrastructure, those kinds of things.
Yeah, but if this conflict drags on, those investments are at risk.
And that could set back India's economic goals in the region.
It's a tough balancing act for India. They need to protect themselves, but they don't want to make the situation worse.
They don't want to poke the bear, so to speak.
Exactly. It's a geopolitical puzzle with no easy solutions.
So for our listeners who are preparing for the UPSC exams, this is the kind of scenario you need to be ready for.
This is real-world international relations playing out in real time.
It's all about power dynamics, security dilemmas, alliances, and the complex interplay between domestic and international politics.
This isn't just a news story. This is a living, breathing case study.
Okay, so to wrap up, we've explored the tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan, the role of the TTP, and the potential impact on India. But we want to leave you with a final thought.
Something to really chew on.
What are the long-term consequences of this conflict, especially for India? How will this impact their strategic calculations and their foreign policy in the years to come?
It's a question with no easy answers, but it's a question we all need to be thinking about.
So we've given you the information, the tools, the knowledge. Now it's up to you to start drawing your own conclusions.
Share your insights with us. What do you think will happen?
We're all in this together, trying to make sense of this complex world.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, please do us a favor.
Like, subscribe, share it with your friends, your fellow UPSC aspirants.
We're back with more deep dives into these critical geopolitical issues.
So stay tuned, stay informed, stay engaged.
And keep those brains working.
We'll see you next time.